Hello, hello. So we are live and we're going to do a Q&A here. What's up, everybody in the chat? Basically, right now, I'm trying to make sure that my internet is working sufficiently. Um, but I figure we might as well hang out and, yeah, just do sort of like a chill kind of live stream Q&A session. So if anybody wants advice or wants to know, about headphones that you haven't had a chance to try yet, just by all means, throw your questions into the chat, and I'll probably be able to get to them. There's not that many people on right now, so uh, it's nice when there's I don't have to sift through the chat. Um, Normally, I have people like Metal571 drawing in crowds, huge crowds. I'm not quite the same YouTube sensation yet, so maybe we'll get there. Mind blowing says I just purchased a pair of Focal Allegia after watching your review. Yeah, I tend to think like the standards for closed back headphones is probably shouldn't be the same for open back headphones. Um, but I do think when you EQ the Allegia, it's got some slam. It's one of the better ones, I think. Soundstage on the Verte open versus soundstage on the Verte closed. I think that's what you're asking, right? Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to hear the closeback Verite yet. I think Zach is going to try and get one out to me at some point. But for those ones, we've said this in the past on live streams. It's really difficult to get those when they're being constantly made for customers. So it's hard to get a demo unit, especially because it requires an extended period of time as well, right? So to be able to put together a full review, at least a couple weeks. Sheldon Thomas, what's up, man? Good to see you. Martin, good to see you. Please give us a background on EQ programs. Yeah, so I'm actually going to be doing a full video on EQ and how to make EQ work. And I guess you guys can see this. I'm working on some graphs here. Let me just bring my EQ over here, right? So this for example is my EQ profile for the Verte Open. Let's see if this works. And here's what the curve ends up looking like, right? And actually, I did measure the Verte, but I'm gonna be doing probably a full video or article at least on ZMF Verte measurements with different pads. So how it measures. Right now I'm using the BE2 suede pads, but there are so many different pads, and they all change the sound. So I'll probably do like a full article. I think there's actually still a few pads that I'm missing. So I may reach out to Zach and see if I can snag some additional pads that I'm missing before I do that. But yeah, basically this is how I EQ the Verte. I add a little bit of let's say upper mid, like around 3 kHz, and this it doesn't make it perfectly match the target. Like for example, if you let me just get rid of, okay, yeah, so this is, you guys saw this in the latest Aria video that I did, but the dotted line here is the target. This is actually a custom target that I've kind of put together. That's a hybrid between the 2013 Harman target and the 2018 Harman target. The dotted line is, it uses the 2018 treble and mid-range and upper mid-range, but the 2013 bass, because the 2018 bass is hilarious. It's like it's enormous. Actually, maybe I'll try and throw that up here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Let's see. Harman 2018. There we go. So let's just put that on here. What's up, everybody who's just joining? Am I missing anything? Oh, it's just really low. 3.4. All right. So let's get rid of this. So here is the bass on the 2018 Harman target, which I think is it's way too high. But yeah, I'll probably be doing a full video on how to EQ. And so what I try and do is I try and, with fairly wide Q values and a kind of conservative approach, I try and, it's the same that everybody else does when you're trying to EQ, is you look at a measurement that's taken on an industry standard rig, and you try and get the frequency response curve to get closer to what the curve ends up looking like. So if you want it to match this Harman curve, this is actually the custom curve, then yeah, you would just bump up the various different places. But I try and use the widest Q values that I can and kind of just adjust ranges rather than like individual frequencies or like very small ranges. I try and adjust wide ranges. So yeah, I'll probably do a full video on how to do EQ using equalizer APO, because I really do feel it makes a huge difference for, if you're willing to do EQ, you can, take a headphone that you think is okay and make it something that you absolutely love. As far as evaluating headphones based on EQ, though, I think that's a different question. And I don't know if Crin's in here right now, but talking to Crin about this, I tend to agree that, like, if somebody is gonna buy a headphone, I don't think the expectation should be that you're gonna buy it and then have to EQ it. Even though I do think it's probably worth doing, right? So it'd be better if you didn't have to EQ it, obviously. But if you're comfortable doing EQ, it does help. Let's see. 2018 Harman target equals big old bass shelf. Yeah, right. Like it seems too much. I know there's a lot of people who, even the 2013 target, they're like, yeah, the bass shelf is not necessary, and like I can understand that. I think so much of that depends on looking into the tests that were actually done, and not just relying on the snapshot of the target that it gives you anyways, or the end result. Like, it's probably worth looking at that more in a more fine-grained approach. Sorry, the cops are driving by. Elba says, hey Andrew, can we discuss some of the highest noise isolating gear out there? IEMs, closed-back cans, underappreciated. That brings, it's an underappreciated feature that helps bring out details in varied environments. Yes, so that's actually something that I think is super important, and that's one of the reasons why I like closed-back headphones so much. Even if you're sitting at home, there's the tiniest little sounds and little noise floor elements, right, can still creep in there for open back headphones, especially some of the ones that are like really open. And I tend to think like closed back headphones, even though they make some trade-offs as far as technical performance and frequency response, and there's all kinds of concessions that have to get made when you damp the back, or figure out some sort of damping to deal with the resonances when closing off the cup. I still think it's worthwhile. Like, the trade-off is worthwhile for the noise floor benefits that you get. And with that said, I mean, IEMs are another great example of that. I think and that's one of the weird things about like open back IEMs. Like, to me, it's like closed back should be the way to go. But I'd like to look more into that, because, and again, not noise canceling, but noise isolating. I think it really makes a big difference. Edemotic IEMs for that kind of stuff. I actually find that most IEMs, at least for me, that have a fairly normal fit, like maybe not the super shallow one like the Luna, but most IEMs that have a really normal fit, you can just get tips that will create a seal. So I don't think you really need to worry too much about that. But then, of course, it matters what tips you get, and it matters what activity you're doing. So like, if I'm walking around, I don't want to use tips that seal, like silicon tips that seal. I'd rather use foam tips. Just makes it a little bit easier. So you don't hear like that really low frequency noise when you step, or when you're like, if you're going for a run or something like that. Let's see. Zenboy says, I just bought the Ananda after watching Centaur versus Ananda review. I've gone from Virum 1 to the Ananda. Early days, some things show a big improvement, others not a great deal. Yeah, the Ananda is a fantastic headphone. And I was even just looking at the price, because I just finished reviewing the Aria, which is $1,600, and the Ananda is $700 now. And so that means that the Aria is twice the price of the Ananda, and they both have a similar frequency response. And I don't think the Aria is twice the sound quality, if you know what I mean. Obviously, you can't really make those comparisons, but I do think like the Aria's technical performance is worth the price increase. Like, I would take the Aria over the Ananda every day. But the frequency response is pretty darn similar there, and some may even prefer the Ananda. It's maybe a little bit less. It's got a few, or not as many treble peaks. Go Penguin all day. Uh, could you compare the Stellia and the Verte closed? Yeah, that's a comparison that I really want to do because I think those right now those are the two top of the line closebacks. I don't think anything really. I mean, it's funny because people often say that they prefer the Verte closed over the open, which kind of hurts me a little bit because I got in on the Verte open before the closed was even available, and I think I probably would have got the Verte closed at the time if they were both available at the same time. Um, but with that said, that's one of the few cases where the closed back headphone is considered better or potentially better by some than the open back headphone. Yeah, this is the Verte open right now, and I mean I showed you guys my EQ profile, and with the EQ profile on, it's funny. Like I turn it on and I'm like, man, I this is one of my favorite headphones, and it just demonstrates why it's awesome. Let's see. What are some of your guilty pleasure artists to listen to? Okay, This is a good one. So I normally listen to acoustic music, jazz music, classical music, anything with instruments that are like acoustic instruments, because I know what they're supposed to sound like because I've heard them in real life. I grew up with my dad was a musician and a music teacher. He was a classical guitarist, and so I was constantly surrounded by like acoustic instruments. So I have a reference point there for what they're supposed to sound like. But my guilty pleasure genre is actually heavy metal. And I think most metal is crap. I think it's like with every genre, right? Like there's a lot of stuff out there that's just not very good, and you got to pick the gems. And I find that in metal there are few gems, but the ones that are there are definitely my guilty pleasure type of music. Metal 571 knows. So like for example, I like Periphery. If I'm listening to metal, I like Periphery. I like oh man, a really a really guilty pleasure band is it's called Pain of Salvation, and it's so like cringe inducing and like eye roll inducing for how serious they take themselves. But the singer has such an incredible voice, Daniel Gildenlow. He's absolutely amazing. And they do some interesting stuff musically as well. Like the again, like the writing and the lyricism, and it's a little bit, to me it just I roll my eyes a bit, but it's good compositions. Let's see. Oh, and I love Opeth, but I wouldn't really say that's guilty pleasure. Opeth is like, they're actually amazing, and I wouldn't really say that's metal anymore. Used to be. Let's see. Periphery, aka smart people music with complex time signatures. Yeah, there's a lot of complex time signatures or that kind of stuff. I like that. But I mean, complex time signatures, that goes all the way back to the days of like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. They were doing that kind of stuff as well. I do actually listen to a lot of Pink Floyd because I find that some of it is reasonably well recorded, for headphones specifically. All right, let's see. I think I missed one here. Susvara or SR1A. Okay, so this is one where it's the Dex and Tyler show. What's up, man? So this is a tough one because I did hear the SR1A, and it was at a meet, but it wasn't like meet conditions exactly. It was in a separate room, so like we couldn't. The rest of the sound from the meet wasn't going into the room where we were listening to the SR1A, because it's like this weird, open winged thing that's not even a headphone there really. And it's like ear field, let's call it. So yeah, Taryn and I were listening to the SR1A and trying it out. I think it's not fair for me to really give a comparison. My preference is for the Susvara, but I think I need to spend more time with the SR1A, like in my home environment, and do like some comparisons and some testing, to be able to tell, because my take on it is that like the detail retrieval that I'm expecting at that price wasn't there. But I definitely feel there are soundstage benefits to that style that you just can't get with a headphone. So I think it's one of those questions of, would you rather have a speaker-like presentation, or would you rather have a headphone-like presentation? And if you're expecting a headphone-like presentation, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much as the Susvara. But if you just want good sound, I think there's definitely something interesting there with the SR1A that's probably worth pursuing and exploring. And you know, this expectation of what headphones should be, you can just sort of like ignore that and throw that out the window. So I don't think it's as fair as saying, you know, one is just better than the other just because they provide such a totally different kind of experience. Let's see. I keep having to scroll back up. This is what I was worried about. This is a reason for super chat. Have you tested the Argon Mark III? So that's Ryan's or Modhouse Audio's T50RP mods. And no, I have not heard the Mark III, but I have heard one of his earlier ones a long time ago. Not from him, but I had a friend who had one. My take on the Argon stuff is that, you know, all these people who are doing like the modders, essentially the modders turned manufacturers, for the most part, the modders who really care about frequency response, they end up putting stuff together that has really good tonality. The one concern that I have about all of those ones that are the T50 mods is that I tend to think we need to move on to something other than the T50. Like there needs to be a new, you know, moddable headphone that everybody is modding, that just has better, you know, technical performance. Let's see. Have you heard the Odyssey MX4? Curious to think where it stands in the lineup, especially between the LCD-X and 4. So this is a question for Metal 571. Because I am not an authority on the MX4, but what I can tell you is that there is quite a bit of distance between the LCD-X and the LCD-4 in terms of both detail retrieval, like technical performance, and also in terms of slam and punch, and also in terms of frequency response. So the LCD-4 I don't think is a particularly good frequency response, but it is certainly better than the LCD-X, I think. So yeah, I think the LCD-4 is worth the price increase. The LCD-4 is one of those headphones where it's ridiculously expensive, and there are things that are wrong with it, but I still think it's probably worth the price because, it's once you're able to reach that level of detail retrieval, it's hard not to, you know, have it be up in that, you know, competitive range with all the other crazy flagships out there, with which none of them really have an ideal frequency response either, except for maybe the Susvara. When I reviewed the Susvara, like, I can see why some people say that the treble is a little bit, like the 7K hertz area has a bit much energy. I can see why some people would say that. But apart from that, the Susvara, the frequency response there was excellent. All right, let's continue here. Yep, serious audiophile music. Iron Maiden, Danzig, Metallica, and the best metal bands. Yeah, I grew up on Metallica. That's why I like, you know, I hear that stuff and it like triggers the nostalgia in me. I never really got into Iron Maiden all that much. Oh, Nickelback. No, I think that's categorically the worst band of all time. Obviously, if you listen to Nickelback and you're hearing me say this, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. Pantera, another great metal band. Yes, Pantera was awesome. Cowboys from Hell, great track. That whole album was awesome. Let's see. Gorgoroth. Gorgoroth with the Focal Utopia right here. Let's see. Metal equals not music. Junk. Some of it, certainly, I would put it in that category. But I mean, like, do we have to be listening to music? What if it's kind of like, somebody was saying that, like, when they hear black metal, it triggers a kind of like ASMR kind of sensation, so they actually feel some physical sensation through listening to metal. And then, you know, like, we listen to Yoshi Horikawa and stuff like that all the time, right? So I mean, I think a lot of it still, you know, qualifies as music, but the reason we listen to it isn't for the music, it's for the crazy sounds that we're hearing with the soundstage and all that stuff. Don't worry, Nickelback. Don't be sorry, Nickelback sucks. Yeah. I'm surprised that they still, you know, have fans. All right, let's see. The Australis really interested me. Yeah, the Australis. So I heard the Borealis and Australis. I don't want to give like a full answer on whether or not I recommend them, but um, I, from that meetup when I heard both of those, the Borealis, I liked that sound signature a lot, and I think for the price, it's probably pretty good, and it goes along with what I was saying before, like these enthusiasts and modders and people who are they come from the enthusiast side of things. I mean, not to say anything bad about engineers. Engineers are essential, but the people who are really meticulous about frequency response and timbre and making something sound natural, like it's like Zach from ZMF, right? Like they end up making stuff that the enthusiast community I think will appreciate. Yeah, Australis sounded like that's the closeback from Aurora's Audio. It sounded like my old Denons on steroids. It had a similar kind of sound signature. So it was a little bit warmer, a little bit like thicker bass, but yeah, like a D2000 on steroids. Let's see. Good amps for ZMF dynamics that are cheaper than Glen OTL and Pendant. Man, I don't know. Like, I if you're gonna get a tube amp, I want to say skip the cheap stuff because there's a lot of really weird. Like, I wouldn't get a Dark Voice, for example. If the one that I'm just thinking of off the top of my head is the one from Cayenne. There's one that kind of looks like a pirate ship. It's got these sort of wooden panels. Looks kind of funny. But that one apparently is decent. The Oris Audio Euterp right there is pretty good for the Verte. You do lose a bit of the bass though. It's not neutral like the Pendant is. So I really think it's worth saving up for the Pendant. The Pendant is one of those amps where I think it competes for ZMF headphones. I think it competes with higher end amps without the need for really, really expensive tubes. I think that's the goal with it, and I think they probably achieved that. But don't quote me on that because again, it's one of those things. Like, I've never evaluated a Verte with a Glen OTL next to a Pendant, right? Like, I haven't been able to do that. Maybe at the next Can Jam, I'll hang out in the ZMF room more, give some feedback there. Felix Audio stuff, yeah. So that's if you're in Europe, that might be the way to go. It's hard to get that stuff in Canada. Let's see. Metalocalypse. What's your ASMR headphone? Man, I'm not into ASMR. It doesn't do that, physical sensation thing for me like it does for other people. Now I've had that kind of experience with like nails on the chalkboard or stuff like that, but I don't really get that from ASMR. I think there's something. It's all the rest of the weirdness around ASMR that kind of ruins the experience for me. So I never really got into it. But I think the best headphone for ASMR would just be the most detailed headphone. like maybe a Sesvara. Yeah, like that would be the best one. Let's see. CIA used to torture audiophile criminals with Stax rig playing black metal. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Stax are yeah. I mean, people talk about the I've even done it, the poor synergy between the Focal Utopia and black metal, because the Utopia is really detailed, but I don't think the Utopia is bright. It's a little rolled off in the bass, but it's not bright like Grado or Stax, and by Stax, like not SR007, like SR009. I think there's probably an argument to be made that some black metal can sound pretty okay on the SR007 Mark II. Let's see. Hey, Chrono, what's up? Chrono's got a big announcement to make at some point. I'm not going to spoil it. Let's see. All right. Marcelo, good to see you here, man. Knowing that the Harman curve from 2013 has shifted significantly, when viewing the 2018 curve from your Aria review, what headphones do you find has the best overall presentation while still having a bit more bass than the 2013 Target? I mean, that's a good question, because if you want something that follows the 2018 bass, like if you want more bass than the 2013 Target, I think that the 2018 Target is probably fine. Like, you could just get something that matches that reasonably close, and then EQ down the bass a little bit to get it, maybe a bit somewhere in between. But my answer to that is probably going to be the AKG K371. I don't know, Metal 571 can update on that, whether or not it follows the 2018 curve. But that was, looking at the graph, that it's pretty bass emphasized. Another one that actually does it reasonably well, I think, is the Odyssey Mobius. So that's also a bit of a bassy boy there. But I still, I think any of those closeback headphones would be where you get the 2018 target. All right, let's see. But yeah, for me, the 2018 bass shelf is extreme, but the treble is good. So I want to keep the mids and treble for the upper mids and treble for the 2018 target. It's still a little rolled off. I want a little more energy there. Because if you listen to headphones that have really good treble extension, that's balanced, maybe again like a Susvara, or honestly the LCD-X, there's some weird peaks there in the treble, but it still extends really far. There's a really nice quality that you get from good treble extension, that I think that both the 2018 Harman Target and the 2013 Harman Target fail to capture. And so that's why I'm kind of devising my own curve that's loosely based on those two targets, but then I'm going to modify the treble a little bit to include a little bit of the it's just the air quality above which the Harman targets roll off a bit. So you can see even on this target that this is a custom one that I put together here for anybody who wasn't here at the beginning of the stream. So this is Harman mids and treble with the 2013 bass, and then I've modified the let's say 12K, the frequencies above 12K. I've shifted them up by 1 to 2 dB, so I think it can go even further than that. So this is just a work in progress. We'll get there eventually. Let's see. What $500 headphone do you recommend for classic rock music? A $500 headphone? Well, I'd recommend the Hi-Fi Man Sundara and an amplifier. But I think for all music, classic rock. I was having a conversation with Fang Bian from Hi-Fi Man in New York about this, and I asked him what do you think about genre pairings, having one headphone for one genre and another headphone for a different genre? And he told me that you can't do that. You gotta be there's probably a truth and reality to the way that something should sound, meaning maybe the way the artist intended or maybe the way the engineer intended, whatever. But that notion of genre pairings didn't make as much sense as I might think it does, because a lot of genres, if you compare classical music to certain classic rock, the type of sound signature that's preferable for that kind of stuff is pretty similar, apparently. And he said for heavy metal, you probably want more bass, and you want it to be a little more relaxed. So that kind of stuff I can see makes sense, but I think there's some overlaps there that we might not expect, just because you think of classical music as being this, something for treble heads only, or only the HD 800 is is good with classical music. I think he's probably right that it's more complicated than that, and our assumptions about what genres go well with what types of sound signatures are probably not accurate. Let's see. Are you interested in reviewing the newer Denons? Yeah, the D9200 is really exciting to me. It's because I want to find the best closeback headphone, and right now the best that I've heard is the Focal Stellia, and so there's a few still that I need to iron out, of course the Verte close, we were talking about that before, and then also there's one from Fostex that I have to try as well, and then I think also the Sony Z1R. But I looked at the graph on that one, and there is a massive peak around 10K hertz, or somewhere around there. It doesn't look like it would be all that great. Let's see. I wonder how Borealis compares to Aeolus. So that's basically what it's going to come down to. Aeolus or the Auteur, right? So and I actually think that the Borealis probably sounds closer to the Auteur if I had to compare the two. When I heard it, actually I think Litchi was telling me that it was meant to be a little bit closer to something like the Utopia, which in the back of my mind was like, oh, so like a little bit brighter. But no, like the Utopia is. Here, let me just actually pull up the graph for the Utopia here. The Utopia, this is the Utopia. So it's actually not that bright. It's like a fairly neutral-ish sound, neutral, I guess, neutral to the Harman target. Or at least the 2013 one. So it's not brighter, or at least not significantly brighter. A little bit more emphasized in the mids in some weird places, depending on where you normalize. But yeah, I don't think that this is. I don't think it fits with the reputation that it has. So yeah, I think the Borealis and the Auteur would be the really interesting ones to compare, just because from memory, I think the Borealis sounded the closest to the Auteur. Let's see. Have you tried any Woo Audio amps? I have tried them at Can Jam New York. I tried the Wah 33. I think it's actually in the video when we're all hanging out. And I tried that with the Stax SR 007, and I tried it with or maybe it was the 09. It was one of the Stax. One of the, not the like rectangular ones, one of the round ones. And then I also tried the Abyss AB1266 Phi TC on the Wah 33. Sounded great to me, but I mean, it's like, how can you really evaluate an amp, over the course of 20 minutes at a show, and you're not really comparing amps to other amps? It's just there with the headphones. Let's see. Have you heard the Baby Oris Earman amps? I have one right here. They are great. I mean, they don't sound any different from other like ESS based amps, DACs, whatever, or at least not substantially. I mean, this at the like entry to mid level pricing, like this stuff should sound pretty similar across the board, depending on which DAC that gets used. And the DAC in here is, I think it's an ESS based DAC. That sounds fine to me. It definitely has that slight ESS kind of like analytic sound. Yeah, sounds fine to me. I think this is like kind of to replace the IFI Nano. And the one thing that I will say with this is that, so you have like a 1/4 inch plug, and then you have a 3.5 millimeter as well. But the 3.5 millimeter I don't think is suitable for IEMs. Whereas if you look at like the Micro Black Label, which is more expensive for sure, but it's got that IEM selector, which I don't use actually because I find that kind of messes with the sound a bit. But so the 3.5 millimeter here, I tried it with some IEMs. I think it's just too much power. It just gets too loud. But the nice thing about this is you get USB-C on the back. So moving forward, let's see. What is the rarest good headphone that you know? Rarest good headphone. I guess that makes sense to say, because you could think of some of those like AMT driver headphones from way back at the not full range AMT like the headphone, but like they were trying to use AMT with headphones and they didn't sound very good. I think there's some Bravo ones that just didn't sound as well, like that would also fall into that category. But rarest good headphones, I think, is probably the Borealis. Yeah, that'd be my guess. Like if you want something super unique, Borealis. It's not the rarest. You could probably find something that's more rare, but these days, maybe even like, okay, this is gonna sound dumb because it's not really that rare, but the HE500 from Hi-Fi Man, I don't think they're selling them anymore. So if you can find one, buy it, because it's amazing. And yeah, I wish I still had mine. Let's see. If you want 2018 Target, why not try Aria featuring Big Boy Bass Shelf? They can take it. They certainly can. That's the nice thing about these. Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of headphones that can take EQ, but planars and E-stats, like, you might as well. I do think like the hobby gets way more interesting if you refuse to EQ. Like this is something that on the subject of EQ, which again I'm going to make a whole video about that. But if you get into this hobby and you're decided like I'm never going to EQ anything, then suddenly your judgments about have like one headphone versus another headphone will be completely different from somebody who's okay with EQing stuff. But then also what like the different sound signatures that you get from different headphones that have different sound signatures, like you have such greater range for variability rather than just tuning everything to the same target, right? If you're going to EQ something, you're going to try and fix the sound, right? That's the reason to do it, or maybe just make something a little bit more fun in one place or another. But at least I tend to think one of the main reasons to do it is to try and get it closer to a target that you like. It doesn't have to be this one or the Harman target, but yeah, if you don't EQ, there's so much more range of possibility for what you're going to end up enjoying that that the hobby kind of never ends until you eventually find yourself listening to an HD6XX again. Let's see, or maybe you'd end up with a Focal Clear or ZMFO Tour. ZMFO Tour is like the perfect sound signature for me. At least it's pretty darn close. Let's see. Do you still use the Phonitor? The Phonitor, yeah, it's in the back there. So that's the one that I like to use with dynamic driver headphones. Like you can use it with whatever. There's nothing. There's no reason not to use it on whatever. But if I want to use, if I have like a really power hungry headphone like the Susvara here, or the LCD4, I'll run it balanced off this Kayan IHA6 because the Kayan IHA6, at least from what I can tell, has more power there out of the balanced output. The specs for the Phonitor X, it doesn't really make any sense. They, I think it's just part of the way that it's designed, but it seems like it's variable depending on the load that you give it, or the load that it sees. So there's something weird going on with that I don't know if it's as appropriate for inefficient planars. Whereas the IHA6, that's literally what it's meant for. So it's a high current amplifier with 7 watts a channel. Like there's so much power here. Let's see. But I mean, with the Phonitor X, you got way more controls and cross feed and whatever. It's full of buttons. Let's see. Rock and metal. You want a planar? Yeah, I can see that. Atom Stack Review. So those are amps that I haven't, there's the new DAC as well. I haven't really gotten into those, but I know that they measured well. But to me, that stuff doesn't matter all that much. It matters for like conducting headphone testing, sure, but for enjoyability, I don't know. All right, let's see. What do reviewers mean when they say cans are fast? New to audio. That is a very good question. So speed. In my reviews, when I refer to speed, or I make an evaluation on speed, it's generally the sense of, let's say, tightness and control. Now, I think that corresponds with what people used to describe as, the immediacy of the initial leading edge of, transient response and stuff like that. Or like the attack and decay and stuff like that. But to me, like those all kind of come together in this larger category of image clarity, which, I mean, again, there's all of this stuff is probably available somewhere in the frequency response. So, I'm not analyzing it in terms of that. I'm just saying from the experience category, from what audiophiles like to talk about, a lot of this ends up leading to image clarity and image distinction and structural definition and all that kind of stuff. But if I had to analyze speed on its own, which again I think is one of the more difficult ones to do, I think it is that sense of tightness and control that you get, because if something isn't fast, if something is kind of slow, you notice that. That's like it sounds loose, basically. So the opposite of a looseness, that's probably the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I talk about speed. But again, like some people could be using the term to refer to the literal speed of the driver, which, I mean, that would mean something else. And I think, yeah, ultimately, like, you could probably correlate that strongly with detail retrieval. But I do think there are some headphones that are fast that aren't necessarily detailed. Like, there was one older Mr. Speaker's headphone that I thought was fairly quick, but also didn't have as good detail retrieval. Like, it was fine, but that wasn't the exciting thing about it. Can you compare the Verte versus the Auteur? Yeah, if you don't want to, that's okay. That's a tough question. The Auteur has a more, to me at least, for my ear, has a more natural sound signature. But the Verte is faster. Again, this is the term speed we're talking about. So it has a better sense of control. And I also find that planar magnetic headphones do that quality really well, by the way. But I used to always want to gravitate more towards planar magnetic headphones because I found that dynamic driver headphones, they were never as tight and well controlled and as fast feeling as good planar magnetic headphones, until I heard the Verte and I was like, oh, there it is. So I'm no longer missing that quality. With that said, the Auteur's frequency response is quite a bit more agreeable for me, at least. And the Verte, I find, you can use different pads and change, the sound signature and frequency response with different pads, which is something that I recommend trying out, because these pads, this is the Suede BE2 pads. I think I like them better than the default pads, the Verte pads, and the Universe pads that came on it, or both Universe and Verte pads. So and it kind of brightens it up a little bit, because the default sound signature, especially with the Universe pads, it's quite warm, and almost like dark sounding there in the mid range. So in like the upper mid range. So for me, I do EQ the Verte. And I think if you're comfortable doing a bit of EQ, the Verte is going to be hands down the better sounding headphone because it just has better technical performance there. But if you don't want to EQ anything, the Auteur is one of the best frequency responses, at least to my ear. No, I wouldn't exactly call the Aeolus loose. Headphones that are example of not tight sounding. So I have a night owl back there. That's an example of that. Let's see. Or another good example, the Meze 99 Classic. Not a particularly tight or controlled sounding headphone. The low impedance DT whatever series from Bear Dynamic. Those are not particularly like the 1770, and even even the older ones. The low impedance versions are not particularly fast sounding. Let's see. But again, like all these terms, these are just like, it's all just analogies and metaphors at this point. Like nobody is anchoring these to, qualities of the frequency response that they're able to measure and identify and point out. I think maybe one day we can do that with, we might be able to do that with certain qualities, but yeah. At the moment, I don't think it's possible to do yet. We have to just analyze it better. Let's see. What would be your pick for a headphone with a budget of around $1,600 US? It depends what you want. If I talked about this in my Aria review, but if you want something that has a crazy soundstage with lots of depth and a really good tonality frequency response, the Hi-Fi Man Aria is the way to go. If you want something that has punch and slam, the Focal Clear is the way to go. And if you're okay doing a bit of EQ and you want a punch and slam, but you still want a planar, the LCD-X, it's got good detail, but yeah, I definitely think the LCD-X needs EQ. Thankfully, there's enough EQ profiles out there. And by the way, I just did a measurement of Reveal Plus with the LCD-X. Let me actually just pull that up here. I'll get rid of the Utopia graph. I'm just going to bump it up here so that you can see. This is the LCD-X relative to the basically the Harman target with Reveal Plus. So it does help the bass response here a little bit. This is an averaged plot. That's why it looks kind of funny. But it does help the bass response, and pretty much everything up until the like 1K is decent with Reveal Plus, because it's otherwise it doesn't have this bass elevation, doesn't follow the bass shelf there. And it does boost this range here, but not enough. Like, I think for this one, it's just a little bit conservative. I think they needed to go a little bit further with the LCD-X Reveal Plus, but they may have developed that for an older revision of the headphone. So whereas this one measures a bit darker. But let's see, Auteur versus the headphone would be very interesting. Yeah, but I can actually describe that a little bit, what that difference is. So the Auteur is a little bit warmer. Again, the concept of neutral, just we need to get rid of that. But using that term for now, the Auteur is a, let's say, warm take on neutral, slightly warm take on neutral, again, depending on the pads that you use. But it's really well balanced, and the head audio headphone is maybe a little bit counterclockwise tilted relative to that. So let's say the head audio headphone is like an audiophile's version of neutral, where the Auteur is maybe a normal person's version of neutral. But for detail retrieval and textural nuance and all that kind of stuff, the head audio headphone is superior, definitely. The head audio headphone, I think, like, it competes with higher priced headphones for technicalities. Let's see. Can a single-sided planar be as good as a double-sided planar? Interesting question. So apparently the Hi-Fi Man Deva is actually double-sided. So the answer is yes, emphatically. Not that there's anything wrong with the Deva, other than it's a $300 headphone that I think it doesn't really quite compete. Is THX chips amps overrated? If not, would you recommend SP200 over the 789? I can't really say either way, because I've listened to the THX 789 headphones on the THX 789, but I can't comment on the SP200. With all that stuff, I think it's the measurements of them is a little bit overrated, because we're already past the threshold of human hearing for those differences that show up on the measurement. They're not actually audible. But with that said, I should have a D90 in for review at some point, and that uses the AKM 4499. So that should be interesting. I have a hunch as to how that's going to sound, but the latest and greatest. Although who knows what they're going to be coming out with this year. Okay, Night Owl / Nighthawk is good if you want an uber lush sound, but my god, they colored. So yeah, I tend to agree. Like, and actually, Android and I were talking about this, about like guilty pleasure headphones, and I think he said that actually no, maybe it was Kryn who said this. Somebody said that the Night Owl was their guilty pleasure IEM or guilty pleasure headphone, which it definitely would be. I use it as kind of like a mental reset for what, let's say, consumer tuned headphones sound like, with like crazy bass response. But at the same time, there are some things that it does okay, like again, if you want that kind of warm, lush sound, then I guess. But I wanted to just mention the notion of colored. I always think that's kind of weird, like the term colored, because if you, like, again, take the analogy as far as it can go and like compare it to looking through a window. Obviously, we would want the window to be clear, but the problem with talking about colored sound versus clear sound is that we don't know what perfectly clear is. So, if you assume that, say the 2013 Harman Target is a clear sound, perfectly, as if it's a perfectly transparent window, then maybe that makes sense. But I don't think that works quite the same way. I don't think you can say, I don't think that the Harman Target can't be improved upon somehow. And I got suspicion about the Harman target, just even doing some measurements now. I get the feeling the reason why the Harman target is a little bit warmer than I think would be ideal, and it's a little bit rolled off in the treble. I think that's actually because people are listening to recordings that suck, and so then their preferences skew a little bit more, let's say, relaxed. Now, of course, that it requires diving into the research that's being done actually on this, because I can't tell you, I'm not confident enough to tell you that this is what he actually did. But my suspicion is that the reason why the Harman target is a little bit not as well extended in the treble as it probably should be, is more to do with what people are listening to. And so it's like basically being cautious. It's a cautious target, I think. But yeah, getting back to that notion of colored sound versus clear sound, I like, to me that just doesn't make sense, and I think we should probably like not think of it like that, because there isn't a answer yet to what is perfectly transparent. I think we're still trying to figure that out. Let's see. Would I call the aorist loose? No, I think I talked about that already. I'm not even gonna read that. Let's see. What was your first headphone? All right, this is a good question. First headphone. So before I got into headphones, my first headphone, because I was a drummer, and I had an electric drum set from Roland, and I wouldn't, because I lived in a house with my parents, I wouldn't be able to play whenever I wanted. So I had some headphones that I bought when I bought the drum set. Like, it was just headphones that the music store had on the wall, and they were, I can't even remember the brand name. It started with an A. It was like the A40s or something like that. And I thought it didn't matter. At that point, I was like, you know what? This stuff, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just so I can hear my drum sounds. And then it wasn't until I got into like competitive gaming where I thought to myself, I should probably get some better headphones. And then it involves going down the rabbit hole of let's say marketing gimmicks, where it's there's not really any actual information given about various different headphones, and you can go from one gaming brand to another gaming brand, and they're all pretty much terrible. And so I bought something from Creative at the time, or as Creative partner with Fatality. At least that was how it was branded, and it was really bad, really bassy. And that's the weird thing. Like, they make stuff for gamers, but they tend to make them pretty bassy, and I always thought that seems wrong. But so then after that, I thought, okay, I'm never doing this like gamer headphone thing again, and I switched to I did research. That's that's when you join HeadFi and you go down those threads and see what people are saying. And I did my research and settled on the Denon D1001. And that happens to be now the Creative Orvana Live, and I think it's the EMU Purple Heart, the little one. I can't remember the actual model name for that one. So they still make that headphone, and you can still buy it in different forms. But yeah, I think that was a Biodynamic, and I remember that was the first like insight into good headphones, and it was cheap, but I think they're still really cheap. They're like $80. But after that, it was kind of like, oh my god, the world opened up, right? And so then after that, it was I got the Biodynamic DT880, the middle ohm one. I can't remember what the impedance that actually is, not the highest one. And then after that, I got the Denon D2000. And then after that, it was the HE500 from Hi-Fi Man. So, and then, the Odyssey LCD2, and the story continues. I've been doing this since 2009. Let's see. Verte competes with Heck V2 in details. I haven't heard the Heck V2. I heard the Heck V1. I don't know about that claim. That's a Maybe. I don't mean I don't know as in like no, but I mean like I actually don't know. Um, Certainly the HE1000 SE I think is more detailed than the Verte, but the HE1000 SE, the tonality is super not okay. At least the one that I heard. Again, there could have been revisions that were done to this in the meantime. Like this stuff always, they're always pushing the boundaries on this. And actually, I think Martin, you were talking about this, how it sucks that there's these revisions that happen that to headphones from especially from companies that we love and we want to be supportive, and then they constantly make revisions and they don't release updated models. It's just sort of like pushing that same model that they had further, and it does get to be a bit frustrating because if you're somebody who's buying a headphone, you don't know if you're buying whatever the latest revision is, because they've never told you this. They've never told you like what was changed. Thankfully, in the case of the Aria, they did tell you. It was fairly public what they changed, and it was the dust cover. So they weren't hiding anything, and they said the sound should be the same. I found that it was just a little different, but for the most part, it was the same. But then you have Odyssey doing this as well, and so I think it's like the fact that there's well, A, unit variation, but B, the fact that there are these kinds of revisions that happen in major headphone brands. It happens all the time. It's just another reason to be okay with doing a bit of EQ, I think. Let's see. The David doesn't have symmetrical magnets, though. I don't think one side is much smaller. Same thing with the Aria, though. The Aria has... That's, again, I was talking... My conversation with Fang Bian, he went into the detail about this. With pretty much all of them, they've stopped doing like this, like symmetrical magnets. Even on their high-end stuff, they've been doing asymmetrical designs. What's the best mid-range headphone and DAC amp setup? Mid-range. I mean, probably the THX 789 with whatever DAC. I think, didn't they make like a matching DAC for that? I could be wrong. Yeah, or just get something from like I know there's a whole bunch from Topping and some fairly inexpensive DACs out there. I actually really liked that combo of the IHA6 with the IDAC 6. Now I can't find an IDAC 6 anywhere, but those aren't too expensive either. Those are like $600. But yeah, it's the THX stuff's so cheap now that I can't really complain. But it depends. Like if you consider mid-range like $1,000, then you got different choices to make. Just for pure detail retrieval, how much of an improvement do you think the Verte Open is compared to the Aria? Okay, that is a tough question because I kind of think that they're about on par. I think the Verte might be just ever so slightly better, but because it's it's a dynamic driver headphone and the Aria is a planar, you just get different qualities. So the Aria does better at instrument separation and all that stuff, whereas the Verte is, because it's using that beryllium coated driver, it's just a little bit better for that sort of like, let's say, image clarity. And I hesitate to say detail because people will maybe get the wrong sense, because the frequency response is so different as well that the Aria just it's got a way better frequency response for detail and for image clarity. But for the internal kind of detail retrieval that I like to talk about, I think the Verte is just a hair better. And then the Verte, it's also really, really fast. But really, it's a planar versus a dynamic. I think they're fairly competitive. The Verte slams harder. Here's the thing that I love about the Verte, and the reason why it's my favorite, if not my favorite headphones. It does everything well. Obviously the tonality, like, it's not going to be for everybody, but it's because, again, it's a sort of warmer thing. If you're looking for a brighter kind of sound, then one of the Hi-Fi Man headphones is probably better. But there's always a trade-off somewhere, right? The Focal Clear is punchy with a good sound signature, but it doesn't have its soundstage is very intimate and it's very towards you. The Aria has a fantastic soundstage, great tonality, great frequency response, very clarity focused, analytic, but it doesn't have much for punch and slam. LCD-X has punch and slam, good detail, but the tonality is just not good, and then the center image for the soundstage is very pulled in towards you. Um, so, the Verte, in my mind, it's kind of like that all rounder where it just does everything well. Like, I don't think it's the most spacious compared to the some other headphones that do soundstage a little bit more spacious. And it's not the most punchy, but it's almost the most punchy, and it's almost the most spacious. It's almost the most detailed, right? So it does all of these things, all these technical categories that I care about really, really well. It doesn't really sacrifice on. It's not really like a trade-off on anything. The only thing is that you got to get the right pads that work with the sound signature that you want, for starters, and then yeah, I just EQ it because it's easier. And then also the nice thing about the Verte is that it does sound totally different on tube amplifiers. And I really like the Verte on the tube amplifier with the ZMF pendant in particular, actually. All right. Do you notice your neck and shoulder strength after wearing headphones for a while now? Well, see, I don't wear the Odysseys all that commonly. I have been using the LCD-X a lot while doing EQ and stuff like that. And actually, I find the LCD-X to be not too bad after a full day. I tell myself like 500 grams is kind of like the limit. And if you like compare the LCD-X, which is more than 500 grams, it's like 650 grams basically. If you compare that to like the Final Audio D8000 Pro, which is, yeah, I think it's like 550 grams, something like that. The LCD-X is more comfortable than the D8000 Pro. So it's not just about weight. It's also about, weight distribution and how the headband system works and all that stuff. Okay, let's see. We'll get to some of the more recent questions here. I'm sorry if I miss anything. You just have to remind me. Want to add the Aria and the Auteur to my headphone and Allegia and 6XX. Dude, you're gonna own all the good headphones here. Aria and Auteur, man. Is Corinne who liked the Nighthawk? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. He loves bass, so I can see that. So you have all the driver types. Yeah, but you gotta have. Wait, but don't you need stacks for that as well? I think you need, or I guess you could get apparently the Hi-Fi Man Shangri-La Junior is actually really good. So I'm on the lookout to try and get a hold of one of those. But then of course, like, what amplifier? How do you pair that? Because the Junior has its own amp system as well, and I asked about that, and apparently they're low on those at the moment. So, the RAL. Okay, I see what you're saying there. Yeah, no stacks. Have you heard the SR007 Mark 2.9? Because I think that would change your mind about stacks. Change my mind about stacks. It's because they don't listen to serious audiophile music. That's right. Exactly. Do you enjoy the? Oh man, I think I lost my place. Do you enjoy the Aeolus thoughts versus the Auteur? Yeah, I like the Aeolus. It's great. It's a very let's say a very comfortable sound signature. But I think I like the Auteur sound signature better. The Auteur has crazy soundstage as well. Like, the Auteur is like you're sitting like a little further back, and it almost at times feels like I'm sitting too far back. Like I want a little bit more like intimacy almost. That was the only real downside with the Auteur, I thought. But again, you can change all that with pads as well. So, and that was, before I got into pad swapping. It's more fair to say colored relative to, yeah, exactly, right? Like, if you're going to talk about colored sound versus transparent sound, you have to define what you think transparent is. That's kind of the way to go, and that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to represent these graphs this way, to show the raw measurements and then the targets associated there, so that it's not just a flat line, because there's so much like misinformation out there about whether or not something should measure flat and what flat means, and it's just ripe for confusion, to the point where even like I'm not going to say who it was right now, but I've been speaking even with engineers who wanted their headphones to measure flat, and so they made them measure flat, and that meant that they completely missed the pinna gain, like the ear gain that is required, pretty much, like any of the rise here, right? So it was just all gone. And then, part of the whole marketing initiatives was that it measures flat, and it's like, well, it does measure flat, but you don't want that. Nea Obliviscaris is awesome, dude. Okay, I want to like that because it actually sounds well recorded, but man, I can't get over the grunting. It's too much for me. Like if I'm listening to like that kind of stuff, I'd almost rather listen to like Meshuggah or like old school Opeth. Let's see. Yeah, actually, I might as well use this opportunity to go through some test tracks, like tell you guys what I like to listen to for testing. I did a whole list of my test tracks. It's on the forum there for headphones.com, and so if you guys want to know what I listen to for my test tracks, actually I'll just paste it in the chat here. Songs to test headphones with. There we go. Yeah, so I did a list, and then I also talked about like what specifically I'm listening for in each track. Oh man, it's gone. Haven't visited this thread in a while. Okay, let's get back to where are you guys here? Here's my headphone listening test track, and justification for why I chose those. I obviously listen to a lot more than just those. Oh, Meshuggah, that's really technical stuff. Yeah, I mean, for the percussion it is. I wouldn't say it's musically all that technical or all that interesting. But it's another one to put up there for guilty pleasures for sure. Okay, yeah. So like for test tracks, if you want to test Sibilants, the best test tracks for Sibilants are from Patricia Barber, and it's Code Cool. This one here, Code Cool. Like you might not be into this kind of music. I'm not going to play it obviously because it's going to get the algorithms are going to trigger. But even if you're not into that kind of music, it's like self-indulgent piano jazz with female vocalist. The way that the S's come across in that recording, it's intense. So if you're wondering if a headphone has sibilants, that'll reveal it for you. Just don't listen to that with a Bayer Dynamic headphone because you will go deaf. Listen to Wonderwall from Oasis, the sibilants. There's another one. Yeah. Actually, Periphery is pretty bad for sibilants as well. But yeah, I like to listen to this We've Just Begun by Sine. I don't know how to pronounce that. But it's really good for like brass sections, horns and stuff like that. There's a lot of really good textural qualities here. The vocals aren't that well recorded, but the accompanying band is really well recorded. Candace Springs, excellent. I do use Pink Floyd's Animals. This Leslie Autumn Jr. Is awesome for test tracks. This song, Go Crazy, Standards, Under Pressure, good songs. Easy listening, but fun and well recorded. Yep, and there's Nea Obliviscaris for anybody who was saying that before. So there's some ridiculous heavy metal in here as well. This Kyle Eastwood cinematic is really good for piano tones, actually, and for the best piano recordings, because that'll often indicate how well like a upper mid-range section is balanced. I listened to Michael Walney. Let's see if I have that here somewhere. There are two albums. Actually, this one's really good too for violins and violas and stuff like that. But yeah, there's here we go. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Here we go. So this is probably pronounced Weltentraum in German, but this whole album is outstanding for not just piano recordings, but for drum sounds as well. If you want, like, again, put together a test track list and put some of the tracks from Michael Walney's Weltentraum on there because it's phenomenal. But yeah, that's probably enough of my recordings that I use. Let's see. Time to study Andrew's music. Again, not for like necessarily what I enjoy listening to. Some of it is, but a lot of it is there for specific reasons. Actually, I so for oops, not Canvas Springs. I listened to Ulf Wakenius. Um, there's a song called "Suffering" on. Oh, he's recently released a new one. This album. Nope, not this album. But "When God Created the Coffee Break" is a great song. This album here, there's a song called "Suffering," and the beginning of this song, at the introduction, it's basically just like a solo guitar type of sound, and there's I think there's a bass there as well, acoustic, and so I use that actually for testing DAC differences, because I think you can. That's one of the recordings where you can hear it, and it has to do with actually testing DAC filter settings. You can actually hear a difference just with those tones, because you can hear if there's like a slow roll and stuff like that. Let's see. We're going over music way too much here, and it's like way too. Okay, I was gonna say it's way too subjective, but thing is, like full disclosure, like peering behind the curtain, I don't think that things are as subjective as we like to make them out to be. And I think that when we talk about, oh yeah, it's just subjective, you like what you like, etc., I think that's kind of the easy way out, because I also think if everybody had the same like understanding, or the same like preference is different, right? That's a different topic. But like if everybody had the same, let's say, level of understanding for a thing, I think that the differences would be smaller. There'd still be room for preference, of course, but I think that you'd find a lot more agreement there if everybody had the same level of understanding for whatever it is. And I think that's true for aesthetics the same way I think it's true for what constitutes good sound. Let's see. Does the LCD4 have the most detailed bass? Yes. I don't think anybody would argue that. I think the LCD4 has the most detailed bass. Do the LCD4 and headphone have better detail retrieval than the SR1A? Did you try the Jot R? Yeah, I tried the Jot R with the SR1A. Yeah, I think the LCD4 and headphone, yeah, I think they do have better detail retrieval than the SR1A. But again, that's only in the sense of if you're expecting it to sound like a headphone. Like it's like saying, do headphones have better detail retrieval than speakers? Well, yeah, good headphones do, but that's because it's a totally different type of experience. The speakers, you're at a distance, and there's you got the room, and there's crossover, and so there's all kinds of different variables in there. So if you wanted to, I'm not saying the SR1A has that same issue because it's actually on your head, but it's a much more of a speaker-like presentation in general. So again, as much as I'm gonna be willing to say that certain headphones have better detail retrieval than that, that's only insofar as they're headphones and not speakers. I think for internal detail with that kind of stuff, it's really difficult to actually tell. Let's see. Would you say Rune is worth the money? It's what, like $200 a year, something like that. If you're going to use it for the whole year, I'd say it is. Now the thing with Rune though, I don't think that it's worth the money in the sense of like, if you're paying for Spotify or Tidal, right, you actually end up paying more for those services, I think, in the long run. But I don't think, like, if you're comfortable using those interfaces, I don't think it really changes anything for you. But the big advantage for using Rune, at least in my opinion, is, well, there's two big advantages. The first is the ability to stream to multiple different devices. So if you have, I could use my main system here as my Rune core, and then I could be on my laptop over in the living room, and I can just play music from my Rune core through whatever device I have specified over there. So there's a big advantage there if you have that kind of setup. The other main advantage, and I think this is even bigger, is that you bypass Tidal's player. 120 USD for Rune. There you go. So it's cheaper than all those other services. Um, so yeah, if you use Rune, you bypass Tidal's player, and Tidal's player is atrocious. So you don't have to deal with yeah, Tidal's terrible exclusive mode. But Rune has severe downsides as well, and it's if you're using anything else in the background. Yeah, actually, that's the other thing. Rune's DSP is really nice. That's like for anybody who's lazy and doesn't want to learn how to use Equalizer APO, just buy Rune. It's great. So easy to EQ with Rune. And the Odyssey presets are built in there, although again, they're as I showed with this here, they're a little bit too conservative. Let me just remove this and let's look at the Utopia again. Yeah. But yeah, the problem with Rune is that if you're listening to anything while you're also doing other tasks, the audio from the other tasks is gone because you have to run Rune in exclusive mode because their non-exclusive mode is horrible. Like if you want to know what digital artifacting and resample artifacts are, listen to Rune in non-exclusive mode, and it's immediately obvious. So I like to the point where I just think it's completely unusable for non-exclusive on a non-exclusive mode. And that's a real bummer if you want to say if you're playing games or something and you want to have the game audio as well. Like you can't do it with exclusive mode. And then if you're trying to switch between programs, it's okay. You just hit pause on Rune and wait for like 30 seconds, and then you can use whatever other program it was. So it is intelligent enough to figure out, not to be in exclusive mode when you're not actually playing music, but it still screws up programs when you use it. So for example, if I'm in the process of testing a bunch of stuff with Rune and going through whatever tracks, and then I switch to editing a video and I happen to leave Rune open, it completely screws up Premiere Pro. Right? Like Premiere Pro suddenly thinks that the audio outputs that I have specified aren't working, but that's only because they're being they're exclusive to Rune at that time. They're being managed by Rune. So I think if you want something solely for listening to music, Rune is definitely worth the money. And then also, if you're going to do that, you might as well get Qobuz. Rune with Qobuz is awesome. But if you want to listen to music while you're doing other activities, I don't think it's worth the money because you'll end up being more frustrated than anything else. Other activities on your computer. So whether it's, gaming, or if you have YouTube videos, or if you're video editing or something like that, Rune is not a good choice. But yeah, I use Rune every day. To answer, if that answers the question, I use Rune every day. Let's see, what's a good. I'm sorry if I missed your question here. So if I didn't answer your question, just ask it again. Talking about headphones with Oratory made me realize that sound differences are a lot more subjective than I thought. Sound differences? Or, you mean like in terms of like what's going on with like the actual brain matter and like processing like audio signals and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's where things start to get subjective. But as far as like the thing that I'm saying isn't as subjective as we think is like the apart from the fact that we have physically different ears, so we're going to hear things potentially different, there's actually a lot of agreement as far as how things sound. So like when I hear an HD650, it's probably not all that different. Like my experience is probably not all that different from the way that you hear the HD650, because we have the various different gain factors that our ears have, and they might be different from one another, but we've lived our entire lives with these gain factors that our ears have. So our brains are correcting for this, right? So if talking to mad economists as well and orators, like if our brains weren't correcting for this stuff already, you would hear the rise. This would not be fun to listen to. So our brains are correcting for the gain factors that our ears impart to the sound when we actually get the signal to the eardrum. But yeah, I don't think that those elements are as subjective as for that we're talking again about colored sound versus clear sound. I don't think that it's that getting to clear sound is as subjective as people think it is. I think there's there's very real and tangible ways of figuring that out. The question becomes, how much does preference matter? Because I think, if you only want to listen to like EDM and you want crazy bass and you think that it should hit you in the chest, your preference might be different from the person who only wants to listen to piano jazz. But even then, I think the person who wants to listen to EDM is just wrong, and I just lost everybody. No, I'm just kidding. There's room for preference for sure. But my music snobbery makes me think that there's a having a little bit more energy there in the upper mids is probably better than having a massive recession in the upper mids. Let's see. What's a good complementary set of cans of Focal Clear? Looking for something that's a bit more fun, more bass. See, there we go. This is preference, right? Room for preference. If you want more fun in the bass, you want more fun in the bass than the Focal Clear. Man. I would go with something, complementary. So I would go with something that's got a wide soundstage. You know what? Complementary to Focal Clear, I think, would be the head audio headphone. Although it is brighter for sure. But yeah, so if you wanted more bass, no, you'd probably have to EQ that. Something a little bit more like thicker. Okay, I've got an answer for you. The Meze Empyrean. Now, I don't think it quite is like the performance quite matches the price for like detail and stuff like that. But I'd put it I'd put it ahead of the Focal Clear, I think. I'd rather have the Meze Empyrean than the Focal Clear to answer that question. Focal Clear is great, but it's like half the price of the Meze Empyrean. And more like realistic pricing. If you're looking into a dynamic driver headphone, maybe the ZMF Verte. Let's see. Those unannounced revisions are called silent revisions and shouldn't be allowed. No, see, like, I disagree. I just think that they should be announced. I get what you're saying. Like, the silent revisions are annoying, but I think they should keep doing them. They should keep improving, reliability and whatever else that they're doing. But I think they should just, make a new, like, version 2 or whatever, like, make it obvious. So the people who are buying headphones, they're not left questioning. But I understand it from a manufacturer's perspective as well, because if you say you make a revision, what happens to all the older stock? It means you got to discount it. And it's probably less to do with manufacturers and more to do with pressure from dealers, because dealers will buy a bunch of stock and be like, hey, now we have all this stock for whatever this is, and then they come out with another revision, and then suddenly nobody wants the stock that the dealer has. But again, that's just speculation on my part. I'm not totally sure. But I still think they should always be improving things. I don't think anybody should just stop. Let's see. Agree with Chrono, the easy of doing some DSP and Rune is good for doing DSP. I'm actually in the process of porting over my EQ profiles from Equalizer APO into Rune, just so I can use them with Rune and Rune's exclusive mode. Okay, let's see. What would be the subjective tonality and objective technicalities and frequency response traits of your dream headphone? So my dream headphone is a closed back headphone that has the frequency response of maybe a ZMF Tour, pretty close, or something like that, with the technicalities of a Hi-Fi Man Sysvara. That would probably be, if I could get a Sysvara that had the frequency response of, honestly, if I could have a Sysvara, well, the Sysvara is basically that headphone. It's basically my dream headphone, except for that slight 7K hertz emphasis. But I think I'm fine with that. That's the trade-off I'd be happy to make, because I also do EQ stuff, right? So Let's see. Thoughts on SonarWorks? Yeah, I don't use SonarWorks. I don't think there's anything wrong with using SonarWorks. I actually did have their app for a while. Um, my So there's a couple things. First, you got to deal with unit variation, and it's stronger for some headphones than others, of course. But unit variation can seriously mess up a perfectly matched EQ. So if you, and like, I'm not 100% sure what SonarWorks' process is anymore, but I know what what they were doing in the past is a lot of matching things to target curves, and it's definitely something like, if you don't want to EQ and you never want to get into it, SonarWorks is probably decent. The thing is, as well, like with SonarWorks, you can do so much more than what their app has, and their app only has a number of headphones available. It doesn't have everything, but assuming they do have everything at some point, or assuming they have the ones that the headphones that you have. Yeah, my concern there is with unit variation for starters, or what we're talking about, silent revisions and stuff like that happens. So maybe they had a measurement for the, let's say, a old LCD2, and the new one doesn't measure like the old one does, and or like a pre 2016 LCD2, and then the new ones don't measure the same, or something like that. Then you're not going to get the EQ to be as good necessarily as if you were to do it by hand. But that's the other thing, is if you don't want to do it by hand, it's probably still going to improve it to a significant degree. So I still prefer to do things kind of by ear and do it just fairly conservatively. Even when I was just doing I was redoing my EQ for the Verte, because I just measured it with the BE2 suede pads on this on the new Gross rig, and my EQ profile for the Verte changed significantly because I now had measurements that I could be confident in. And when I was doing my EQ, I found that I didn't actually want it to perfectly match the target that I had. And that, I think, that should be telling. Like, once I matched it perfectly to the target and I did the measurement again and it matched the target, it was like, okay, this is what the target is for this headphone. I ended up dialing it back a little bit. I was like, this is not how I want it to sound. So, is that Karthik from Odyssey? I just saw your name. I'm sorry. But yeah, so I think being a little bit conservative with EQ is probably the way to go, and using wide Q values for the most part. I've started to be a little bit more fine-grained on my EQs now that I have the standardized measurement rig, but you still, I think, it's still better to EQ wide ranges and not very specific frequencies. Qobuz is terrific for classical and jazz. Qobuz is so good. Like, if you guys want, like, FLAC level, if you don't want to mess with 320 OGG codecs and stuff like that, Qobuz is the way to go. Do you think MQA will survive? Do we want it to? Oh man, I think the veil is starting to be lifted on MQA a little bit, and I don't think it will survive. Thing is, because products get produced with a certain time delay, you may still see stuff marketed for MQA, and then that engine still runs essentially. But it's the same thing with DSD, right? There may have been a demand for DSD playback, way back, but I don't think anybody does. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but does anybody really care about DSD anymore? Because I don't. And you still see so many things coming out that are marketed with DSD, and it's like DSD playback. It's the it's the best, and I'm like, I don't care. And so for me, MQA is kind of in that same category where it's for me, that's not something that I care enough about for native DSD or native MQA playback, especially if I'm using Qobuz. It's just not something that I care about. And so I think MQA will probably go the way of DSD, and there'll probably be a certain segment of people who really care about MQA, and so sources that can do MQA playback, it'll be nice that they exist for those people. But I'm not really big on that stuff. I use the topping wait, A90? Oh, that's the amp, yeah. And RME 80i2 FS. Had the monoprice THX amp before. Both are clean. Dude, you gotta use spaces after your periods. This is killing me. Clean enough for my liking. Quite cool in the neutral presentation. Prefer neutral analytic sound, most classical at work. Sounds like a good setup. Yeah, like I actually want to get an Army 80i2 at the FS, because that's the 4493 from AKM. I want to get that because so like, as much as I'm comfortable doing EQ with equalizer APO, I'd like the idea of being able to show people who have some sort of hardware based EQ system how you can, like, what kinds of levels you should aim for various different ranges. And I know that there's a lot of bands on that as well, so you can get fairly granular with it. And then also, it would be nice to have it be hardware side, because that way I don't have to have multiple different profiles, multiple of the same profiles for different programs, because that starts to get annoying. I mean, I don't mind doing it. It's not hard to do. It's just, it'd be nice if I didn't have to. Let's see. Any long-term impressions of the Aeon 2 closed? So I actually did have that one for like 2 months, because I did several videos with it. One was the closed back shootout, the other one was the full review of it. Yeah, I think it's for technical performance, it's like it's decent. The thing with the Aeon 2 closed is that it does something that no other headphone does. It's a lightweight, portable, closed back planar with good detail. Like, I don't know anything else that's really doing that, so I think it's worth the price. Yeah, I would still EQ it. The tonality is not quite for me, because it's a bit withdrawn there in the upper mids. Not as noticeably ridiculous as the LCDX, but it has that same kind of like somewhat muted sound to the like upper mid range and lower treble. And interestingly enough, the Aeon 2 closed. Apparently, there are some suede pads that you can get for it, or different pads. I'm not sure if they're suede. They may just be different. That make it a little bit closer to Harman. So that's, if I were to get the Aeon 2 closed, I'd try and get those pads, because that would be, I think, a little bit more normal sounding. Because yeah, like it's definitely a little bit congested there in the bass, and then not enough clarity there for the upper mids. But some people may like that. Good detail for the treble though, definitely was good. Trying to explain what detail and timbre are to oratory was a humbling experience. I don't know that he hears the same details we hear. I mean, this is that question that always happens between subjectivists and objectivists, where one side says, you're not discerning enough, you can't hear the things that I'm hearing, and the other says, well, no, you're not discerning enough, I'm hearing things you're not hearing. And so, like, there's always some impasse there. But the thing with, like, those guys, like oratory and Mataconomist, they're not looking at sound through the lens of an audiophile. They're not looking at, I mean, they might be hobbyists as well, that they might be as excited about this stuff as we are, and enthusiasts. But when they're, putting their, like, let's say, analytic hats on, they're not thinking of this in terms of soundstage, or in terms of detail, or in terms of slam, or all these different like audiophile categories that may have emerged over time that you might find in threads on HeadFi. I think they're really just trying to analyze this in terms of diaphragms producing sound waves and frequency response, and like how that looks. And so if you think about this hobby and what we're doing and with all this stuff, and you kind of zoom out far enough, and you take more of like a, let's say, like a supervening look on like at how this stuff translates, I think they're trying to, rather than coming to the same conclusions that the rest of us do, I think they're more just trying to look at this from as an objective stance as possible, and that means also including all the things that audiophiles may agree on in that analysis, and without actually making them themselves. So you can analyze sound waves, right, and you can all this kind of stuff, but to talk about dynamics and slam and all that kind of stuff doesn't make as much sense when you're just trying to deal with data, right? There's no data for slam, at least not yet. So maybe there is something, as they were saying, like maybe there is something that we agree on as slam or detail or whatever. But it's a matter of figuring out like where that correlates with measurements. That's kind of what they're trying to be doing. Let's see. I have Linux on my laptop. Do you know if I can have an EQ similar to APO? I'm sorry, I have no idea about Linux and EQ. I know about Linux, but I don't know about Linux and EQ. Let's see. Neutral is a bit boring. What is neutral? That's really what I gotta ask you. Like, is this neutral? Is Harman 2013 with 2018 treble neutral? I don't know. Let's see. The LCD4 is probably the best partner for headphone, but owning two 700 plus gram headphones is torture. Yes, that's the problem. You'd probably want one 700 plus gram headphone if you want one, and then another headphone that you use the rest of the time that when your neck gets sore. So something like an LCD1 probably. Let's see. I'm trying to get as many questions as I can here. Which driver type responds efficiently to your EQ? Wait. Which driver type responds efficiently to your EQ in your general experience? Well, they all can respond to my EQ. Are you asking which responds best in my experience? So I haven't had enough experience with ESTAT drivers. But apparently they respond really well to EQ, like extremely well. It's funny, because my EQs are generally quite conservative, I've never had a significant problem, getting it to where I like it, because I'm not adding crazy bass shelves or anything like that might potentially distort the sound. The one exception would be like the Sennheiser HD6X whatever series. Those are ones where I don't think I would really be pushing the EQ too far. And so in that sense, I think probably planars are better than dynamic driver headphones for EQ. I think that's. I'm sorry, your name is Karthik, so I'm like, I'm wondering if you're the Karthik from Odyssey. I'm sorry if I've mixed you up with somebody else. Let's see. MQA seems like DRM to me. Oh my god. No, yes, that's right. MQA magic is the masters, not the format. Exactly. That's been my experience as well. It's like they pick for the masters, they pick stuff that's sounds good anyways. Like if you had a 320 of that and an MQA of that same thing, I don't know how different it would actually sound. Kobuz added so much fun music, so it's not all just classical anymore. Yeah, I know. That's Kobuz again. I'm telling you guys, Kobuz is the real deal. If you were wondering if 24-bit, 96 kHz made a difference, find out for yourself. Just listen to Kobuz. I think there's still a debate, because I think it doesn't really matter for 99% of cases. Spotify is probably good enough, but yeah, I think if you want real FLAC, Kobuz. Real DSD is rare without PCM processing. Yeah, there's usually some sort of like conversion or like upsample or something like that going on. MQA DRM is too inconvenient in the US. The market is near non-existent. People want to use their gear and remove the need to pick specific DAC for DSD. Yep. How does Tidal and Amazon Music HD compare against each other? That's an interesting question. I haven't actually done that comparison. I think there's actually some YouTube videos out there where somebody played back the information that's missing from various different services, and they found that Apple was the worst, Spotify was second worst, Tidal was third worst, and then it was compared to the FLAC file. Amazon, that was before the Amazon HD thing came out, so I'm not actually sure where Amazon falls into that category. I'd be willing to pay though, like that's the thing. I mean, thankfully it's already available for Prime members, which I am, but I'd be willing to pay for high quality music, as long as I can be confident that it's, I'm not losing anything with the player, because that was the issue with Tidal apparently. Let's see, HD5 8X or HD660S. HD660S. I liked it. I just didn't think it was worth the money. Let's see. I've noticed that some album I like are available in higher bitrate on Tidal. Yep. If you haven't already, you should try the, oh man, I can't say that. Sabaj, I don't know how to say that. D5. It's one that I have not actually heard of. Yeah, there's CD quality on Qobuz as well. Do you believe in, okay, here's a good one. Do you believe in burning in new headphones, and what do you use for burning in? Music, pink noise? Okay, so I spoke with Oratory about this, and it should be in the podcast that we did. I think we were talking about it. I think it was live on that podcast, and he talked about how if there is any actual like non-placebo or like psychoacoustic related burn-in, that it would be very quick. Thing is, like, I actually feel like I have experienced that, like with a number of different products. But again, my experience lines up with what he said, which is that, after a really short amount of time, we're talking like minutes. I can't remember what the exact amount of time it was. That's basically all it's going to sound like, and it's not going to change after that. But there's potential that it could change within the first few minutes or something like that. Yeah, don't quote me on the exact time frame, but it's very quick. And my experience lines up exactly with that, where the first like 30 seconds of listening to something, I thought, this doesn't sound like what I remember it sounding like. And then running it, just listening to it for, the next 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, and then being like, no, actually it is the same as what I remember something sounding like. So there's two things that could be responsible for that. One of them is burn-in, like what people talk about what the thing we're questioning right now for like drivers actually burning in. The other thing that could potentially be responsible for that, which I think is probably more likely than anything else, is pads breaking in. So the physical pad material, or in the case of if you're using like foam tips, for example, with IEMs, you're actually, whatever you're actually physically having interact with your physical body, your physical ear or head, that thing's got to wear in a little bit, and so that there's a potential for that to change the sound as well. So in my mind, doing these pink noise long burn-in test things, I've never thought that was necessary. Like before you're able to like enjoy your music. And then the thing with that though is like people will use, oh, you didn't burn it in long enough to invalidate a review. Oh, you didn't burn it in for 70 hours or whatever it was called for by the manufacturer. So your review doesn't count. I think even like, I think even in like Zeos's reviews, he's been criticized of that. And to me, I think like not burning something in doesn't invalidate somebody's opinion about that, because I don't think you need to be doing that kind of stuff before you evaluate it. I think just listen to it. It'd be fine. But I know there's people who have those opinions, so I'm gonna just err on the side of saying it's not necessary to do. But not that it's not real or that it doesn't exist, because I actually do think it does exist for some headphones, just not necessary to do. Have you ever tried any Pioneer offerings, like way back? I think they made some gaming headphones, but nothing recently. I know they had some that were actually like fairly expensive. There were some that they came out with like maybe a couple years ago, and I don't think they got that much traction, because I think they might have been overpriced. What is neutral? Deep question. Yes. HD800 responds very well to EQ like a planar. Yeah, the HD800 also responds well to EQ. Yeah, I'm less confident about the HD800's bass response and how that responds to EQ. Because if you listen to an HD800S, the bass has a bit more distortion there. But it still sounds fine to me. Like, I think it's, yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think it's over the threshold where it might be over the threshold for audibility, but I don't think it's over the threshold for people to care. Let's see. What are you unhappy with in your Elegia? Well, the Elegia, it's mid forward in a really weird way. Like it's mid forward in the like lower and like mid range proper, but then it's like dipped in the upper mid range. But once you even those out, it's a great sounding headphone in my opinion. It's not as clear and clean sounding as the Focal Clear. I don't think you can do that because it's a closed back. You're still dealing with resonant waves and standing waves and stuff like that. But it punches plenty hard, and yeah, I mean it's a closed back that's highly detailed. It's always like, I'm always trying to find like again that perfect closed back, and it's hard to do because closed backs are not as good as open back headphones mostly. Do material affected massive? I think you're trying to say, does the material have a massive effect, like audio companies said, or it's marketing pay more because material costs more? Okay, so this is something where again I asked Oratory about this, and he said that it doesn't really matter what you're using. Like materials are just another parameter, but that doesn't mean that there's a difference, but it doesn't mean that there's not a difference in terms of materials. So I think a lot of it is marketing, like having really good materials. You want to be able to put that on the box. But I also think that when you're working with different materials, that introduces different parameters. So for example, beryllium is something where companies are using beryllium more and more. Focal, with the Utopia, the ZMF Verte's got beryllium on it. There's IEMs now like the A8000 and the Duno Luna that have beryllium. I think when you're using a different material like that, there's benefits, but there's also new challenges, right? Because it's just another parameter that you have to figure out how to make this fit with whatever sound you're trying to get. And I think, especially learning about the Luna a little bit, I think when you do use beryllium, it does introduce new challenges that you have to deal with and figure out with damping and stuff like that. So I do think that the material does make a difference, and the reason why I say that is because if you compare Mylar to biodynamic to beryllium or to aluminum magnesium, there's clear advantages for some of these, and whether or not you like it, biodynamic has a very distinct sound to it, biocellulose that is, and beryllium again has a very distinct sound to it. And if you compare the Duno Luna with the A8000, that's the Final Audio flagship there, IEM, there's a similarity there in terms of the way that it sounds for detail and stuff like that. So yeah, is it better? I think that's really a question that everybody's going to have to answer for themselves. But I think for certain things, yeah, I think materials do contribute certain benefits and advantages. But then, as I mentioned, there are also certain challenges. Let's see. If you own a Dragonfly Cobalt, is it worth buying an Ansel and Stern Ansel & Kern SR25? My headphones are the AudioQuest Night Owl, Focal Elegia EL8, iSign 20. It's basically a question if you want to run music through your phone or if you want to run it through a DAP. There are really good reasons to just stick with a phone, right? If you don't want to carry two devices, stick with the Dragonfly. But if you do want, if you want all of your music to be on a separate device from your phone, then yeah, the SR25 is fine. Let's see. With the $425 Adorama sale on the Elegias, would you buy them at that price point? Yeah, absolutely. Spotify. That's like, yeah, half the price of what they were before. Spotify works. Okay, let's see. I switched to Qobuz recently, maybe because it was a $5 less than Tidal. Is it? That's surprising. I Yeah, I would pick Qobuz over Tidal every day. Yeah, that video didn't have the Amazon HD tracks, so maybe somebody will do. Maybe that guy will do it in the future. If you get a yen to listen to a certain brand or style, do you reach for a certain headphone at the same time? And this is the question that I've been, trying to, I guess, come to a satisfying conclusion on for a long time. And in my conversations with manufacturers, it doesn't sound like things should be changed specifically for one genre or another. But in my experience, yeah, I absolutely have a preference for listening to certain headphones for certain genres. I think it becomes a little bit tricky as a reviewer because you kind of want to know what a certain genre sounds like or certain music sounds like with when you're evaluating one pair of headphones. So you don't switch headphones when you're switching genres deliberately. But I think if I just was a regular like enthusiast and I wasn't deliberately trying to evaluate the headphone, I would definitely have a preference for certain headphones for different genres. So for example, if I'm listening to anything that is maybe a little bit like the recording itself is maybe a little bit less forgiving, it's the Verte every day of the week. If it's something that or again, if it's something where I want to use it with a tube amplifier, I think that's the other thing. It's like for certain music, I want to hear it on tube amplifier, and then it's the Verte. But then for anything with pianos or acoustic guitars or jazz music, I'll gravitate to something like the I don't have it here right now, but the Aria would be the better choice for that. But the thing is, like with all that stuff, the reason why is I don't think it's necessarily the case that all of these like within the genre of jazz, all jazz is recorded the same way. Like I just don't think that's true. I think there's probably some trends, but a lot of it has to do within a genre there could be a wide range of recording styles. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than just saying one genre versus another is good for one headphone, etc. Someone told you that you had to redo your DT990 review because they said you didn't burn it in enough. Yeah, man, it's tough with those headphones because I think they were really popular and they did a really good job of branding them and marketing them and positioning them right. So people think that because studio or musicians and people in studios use them, that they're good for audiophile listening and home listening. And it's kind of like that recognition thing that happens with Beats as well, where your favorite athletes are wearing them and you think, oh, they're wearing them, I must they must be good, they must know things. But I don't think that's actually, I don't think it really translates the same way for audiophile listening. But because so many people have those headphones, like the DT1990 Pro and the DT990 and whatever, because they're so commonly available or commonly found, it's when you say something negative about them, it becomes controversial. Any thoughts on comparing the Aria to the Auteur? Man, it's like one of the perfect combinations if you had both of those headphones. Yeah, they both have a good frequency response. The Auteur is a bit more natural sounding. It's not quite as like there's a few areas in the treble. Like I'll show you the Aria here. I don't have a measurement of the Auteur right now, but the Aria is like relative again to this target here, which is basically it's a version of the Harman target. It's got a little bit of an elevation here. Keep in mind, by the way, these are like 1 dB intervals, so it deviates, but not strongly. It's not like the LCDX did. So I don't think the Auteur is quite as treble emphasized as this is, but so I think it's a bit warmer. But I think the Aria probably has a little bit better detail retrieval, but the Auteur is going to have better slam. It's a really tough choice. I think those are both good, really good headphones. All right, let's see. Where was I? I keep losing my place here. Pads burning in is more likely to be responsible for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if you think about it, right? Like if a headphone's pads are like really stiff, but then when you wear them for a little bit, they like move the actual drivers closer to your ear because they're wearing in. That'll make a big difference. um, just watch movies with plenty of explosions to burn them in. Oh my god. But yeah, this idea of the notion of brain burn in I think has also been overstated. When people say, "Yeah, you just got to burn your brain in," it's like I mean, there is such a thing as getting used to it over time for sure, but I don't. That's not satisfying to anybody who is talking about burn in. I don't think brain burn in because like the other thing with burn in with that kind of like getting used to it quality, you can just switch headphones, and in so many ways, just being like switching to different headphones reveals more about them than if you were to listen to them, one pair of headphones for the whole day. Because there is a tendency to go ear blind, sound blind, if you just listen to one headphone the whole time. All right, let's see. Don't let them bully you. Yeah, exactly. Truthfully asked that question because I picked up their monitor blindly. Interesting. I think only Focal uses pure beryllium though. Well, for over-ear headphones, yeah, only Focal, as far as I know, uses pure beryllium. What was the Cascade? The Cascade, was that pure beryllium? I can't remember what that was. But yeah, I think Focal is the only one who uses pure beryllium. Let's see. Oh, you're taking off, Zenboy? All right. Thanks for stopping by. Any opinions on the Abyss? I assume you mean Abyss AB1266 versus LCD4. Yeah, I actually heard both of those at I've reviewed the LCD4, but I heard the Abyss AB1266 Phi TC at CanJam twice off of different equipment. The Abyss sounds like a LCD4 that doesn't have quite the same. It sounds like it doesn't have quite the same tonality oddities in the upper mid range, but it's still a little bit wonky there. I actually think they're pretty similar as far as their frequency response is concerned. The Abyss AB1266. Okay, this is going to be a weird comparison, but from my impressions at the show, the AB1266 TC sounded like a Dan Clark Audio Aeon 2 closed on steroids, because it was a little bit thicker in the bass, like it had a bit more bass emphasis there, and then it had the same kind of like slight upper mid-range dip, not to the level of the LCD4, which is more like upper mid-range lower treble cut, and then that headphone has crazy air right above like 12K, so all the sizzle qualities are a little bit out of balance there. So the AB1266 I found was more balanced than the LCD4, probably at least as detailed. Again, I need them side by side to be able to make that kind of judgment. I think maybe even more detailed. That's my hunch. I imagine it's a little more detailed. But then also like the AB1266 also has that same crazy treble extension. I think that's just what happens with these crazy high performance planar magnetic headphones, is that you get this bonkers treble extension, which is a good thing. You want good treble extension, but like I think for a lot of them, it's just not controlled well enough. Speaking of which, you getting in the AFO2 by any chance? I think they were supposed to send me some, but I haven't been pestering them. So with the whole COVID thing, all this stuff gets delayed. So I'll probably email them again and try and get an Aeon 2 closed and Aeon 2 open in at the same time. I was actually hoping to have Dan on the podcast at some point, or the live stream at some point, because I'd love to pick his brain on stuff. So maybe we'll do something like that in the future. But yes, I would love to get the Aeon Flow Open 2. Aeon 2 Open? Yeah, you know what I mean. In for review. Let's see. Can an IEM sound as good as a comparably priced full-sized headphone? It depends what price range you're talking about. Because the Blessing 2 came out, and it sounds like there's a lot of over-ear full-sized headphones that I would rather have the Blessing 2 than them. So around that, like, what, $320? Yeah, there's a lot of, like, there's this Andover headphone here, the PM50. I'd rather have the Blessing 2 than that one. But yeah, I think it's totally possible. For high-end headphones, I think that's a tough one. I think no for high-end headphones. AB 1266 bass distorts when EQ'd. That's interesting. That's surprising. I wouldn't have expected that. Yeah, like, I want DMS to do, because there's the DMS mod Diana Phi, which is, I don't know if that's readily available to buy, but if I wanted like a flagship lightweight planar that performs on the level of like other flagship planars, it would be the DMS modded Diana Phi. I say flagship, like the crazy high end stuff. Now, what I'd want them to do is get DMS to mod the Abyss AB 1266, and then, because like his mod, not only did it make it sound better, it made it more comfortable. Like, that was the big thing for me. It's like, why would I, like, the benefits of making it light are obscured by the fact that it like does irreparable damage to my temples. so his mod fixed that issue for me, to the point where I think it's probably one of the best like packages that you could buy, and it is one of the few headphones that I think is really worth the $4,000 price tag, because nothing else does it the same way. And so if he can do that with the AB 1266, the full size, the big one, I'd love to see what that turns into. Let's see. With the Aeon Flow Open 2, I hear people call them the clear killers. Interesting. Okay. There's some BS like that. I haven't seen a good review of them. I mean, this is probably something from like Head-Fi Threads or something like that. Yeah. You did away with scores on your videos. So the reason why I did away with scores on my review videos, I haven't actually done away with scores completely, because I'm revamping the whole system. So I'll back up a little bit. The reason why I had scores in the first place on the review videos is I wanted to have some way of representing the way that I felt about, like, a visual, a numerical way of representing the way that I felt about a headphone relative to its price, right? And if you think about it, like, everything is relative to the price category, price ranges. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because it would have felt weird to give something like, the Blessing 2 a 6 out of 10, which, if you consider the entire range of IEMs that are out there, it maybe be a 6 or 7 out of 10. That doesn't seem accurate for how I feel about it. I feel like it's like closer to like a 9 out of 10, right? But because it's $320, if you were to compare that with an IEM that costs, like the U12T, for example, the U12T is clearly better for detail and all that stuff. Or other IEMs that are like the sort of, they're like S class for everything on Crin's list. And so if I'm representing it numerically, it just doesn't look very good when you're doing it price independent. I think it's easier if you do it with a tiered system, the way that Crin does it. So anyways, the problem when trying to represent it relative to price is that you inevitably end up with scores that are very similar to each other, and then it becomes difficult to compare across different headphones using that score, because again, it's price relative. So I don't think that there's the advantage that's gained by representing it relative to price is not actually an advantage at all, because that number ends up being a little bit useless when you're trying to compare against other headphones that are in different price categories. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm actually putting together a full ranking list, not unlike Crin's, and then I'm using the measurements from the Gross 43AG, and I'm going to be putting together a database for the measurements as well. And so eventually I'll have kind of like a similar list to what Crin put together that's price independent and has tiers. But I'm my aim is to make it so that in my review videos you see where things fall relative to price as well. It's just, it shows maybe like the 5 or 4 headphones that are around the same price of whatever it is that I'm reviewing, and then I'll compare it, put it, up or down, above or below, right? So we won't have the same kind of numerical scores. I hope that answers the question. Oh, and I will have also so the ranking system is going to be like where I think things fall as far as their performance goes, but then also there's going to be a separate ranking for like preference for like what I think is really good. Let's see, because like I might have different requirements from what you might. Like if you want like a perfect tonality with soundstage and you don't care about dynamics, then the Hi-Fi Ananda is like the best headphone there, right? Something like that. But if you care a lot about dynamics and you don't care about soundstage, then maybe the Focal Clear is the better choice, or you get what I mean, right? Like there's different requirements. The Aeon Flow Open 2 is the clear killer. Yeah, I'm curious because the closed one that I reviewed, it had good detail retrieval in the treble. Like it was solid. I was less happy about the lack of dynamics, and the soundstage was still not quite what I was into, and the tonality was not my favorite, but for technical performance I thought it was pretty good. In fact, yes. You really okay? Yeah. Auditioning the and over 5 seconds and over. They're sending me some different pads, so maybe that'll improve it. But that's we'll do a review of the and over PM50. That'll come soon. All right, I'm gonna answer a few more questions here, but then that's probably it because we've been going for 2 hours. Let's see. There was this day I commented saying it was not as nice with the scores and all. You answered, and then I answered, and so on. Then soon the scores were gone. It has nicer flow without them. Oh, that was you. Okay, yeah. Yes. So that's the thing. I realized it was also redundant if I was like representing them visually, like as a numerical score on the screen, and then also saying what those scores were, which I completely agree that's a little bit redundant. The reason why I did that before was because for anybody who doesn't know, all of my reviews, or almost all of them, all my videos, they also get uploaded as podcasts in audio format. And so if you don't have the visual cue there, you don't know if it's how it ranks. But now that we have a totally different ranking system, that should be fixed. Should make that go a little bit smoother. Can't wait to see Beats on S tier. Maybe for some people. Not for me. What about the HD660S/DT1990 around $500 full-size cans versus the Andromedas in terms of sound quality? I've never thought about that. So like, I know this is different depending on like where people live for like pricing and stuff like that, but like I wouldn't buy either the HD660 or the DT1990 for $500. I'd either spend $600 and get the Focal LX, or I'd spend $350 and get the Hi-Fi Sundara and an amplifier. Like I think both of those options are better than either of the DT1990 Pro and the HD660S. And in that sense, no, I would take both the LX or the Sundara and an amplifier over the Campfire Andromeda. But the downside with that is that the Andromeda is so much more versatile for where you can go. Like the fact that those other ones are open back headphones, like they sound good and they sound full and whatever, they have soundstage, etc. But for because like IEMs don't really. To some degree they do, but that's not on the same level. But with the Andromeda, like, I mean, it's a categorically different thing. I think. Let's see. IEMs and headphones, no matter how good they are, I don't agree with the price. And according to Harman and others, price doesn't mean better. Yep. So price, like, I'm not sure about the according to Harman. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not going to really comment on that. But um, I think with IEM specifically, price and performance do not correlate. There's a general trend, and you could make a claim about like necessary and sufficient conditions for this. So you could say like just a high price tag isn't necessarily a sufficient condition, or isn't a sufficient condition for a good sounding IEM, but for like the best sounding IEMs, but it might be a necessary one. Right, so at the highest levels, right, of performance, they will generally also cost a lot of money. But just because something costs a lot of money doesn't mean that it actually is going to sound all that good. For over-ear headphones, I think it's a little bit closer correlated. Like the variability is not as strong. To give an example, you do have headphones that are just, in my opinion, not priced appropriately. Not necessarily like disregarding the other things that they do well, like build quality and comfort and whatnot. But for sound specifically, the Meze Empyrean, I think, is priced too highly for its technical performance. The frequency response I thought was okay. Generally, the bass is a bit muddy, but for the most part, it's okay. But the technical ability there, it's just not on the same level as competing headphones at the same price. Like if you compare the Meze Empyrean against the like LCD4, which it's only like $500 more expensive, I think. They may have changed the prices since then, but yeah, I just don't think it's quite on the level for detail retrieval. Or like take another example, the Dan Clark Audio Ether 2. Yeah, it's a really lightweight, comfortable planar headphone that comes in at $2,000. I think there's a lot of headphones that are in the $1,000 to $2,000 price range that perform better than the Ether 2, sound better than the Ether 2. So yeah, I don't think price is like necessarily perfectly correlated with performance, but I think for over-ear headphones, there's generally a trend. It gets weird. It gets weird at the highest levels because, yeah, it's like it feels like, especially manufacturers who are making planar magnetic headphones that are like using the nanoscale diaphragms and stuff like that with crazy magnets. It feels like they don't actually pay too much attention to the treble extension. Like they just go nuts with that stuff, and that kind of throws things off occasionally. But and then there's also, it gets weird in certain areas where there's benchmark headphones like the HD6XX. Like if you like right now, I think the Sundara is the better headphone than the HD6XX, but anything above that, like until you get to the Ananda, the LX, like $600, like twice the price. There's really nothing else in that price range that competes, I think, and that's a problem because there are headphones that are in that price range, and in those cases they often don't correlate to price to performance doesn't correlate all that well. Let's see. Open and closed rankings. Yeah, I'll have like separate rankings. Like I'm still deciding on ways to represent this because I really liked Tileswold Wall of Fame, but I want something to be more comprehensive. Like, so somewhere maybe in between like a Wall of Fame and like Crin's ranking list. Oh, is there a famous person in the chat? How bad are the dynamics on the Aria? Are the dynamics? I think are the dynamics satisfying for genres like EDM? The dynamics, okay. I've been thinking a lot about this. So the dynamics on the Aria, like let's say macro dynamics, right? The softs to louds, punch and slam, whatever we want to call it. I think that that it's better than the Ananda, but it's closer to that of the Ananda than it is to the something like the Focal Clear. So yeah, I actually think, for EDM, it might be a little bit light on dynamics still. Now I know that you can do because planars have the bass resonance. Hi-fi man planars in particular have the bass resonance where if you move them away from your ear, um, the bass goes way up. So they're the part of the headphones tuning is the way that it's actually coupled to your head. So I know that there are people like Kryn did his mod with the with HE1000, and it's kind of like made it so that it's more like sits out, or out like that, and it increases the bass level like crazy, and apparently that also gives it better dynamics as well. So you could do something like that if you really wanted like a ton of bass slam, but I mean, I don't know if that's something I would do. Is it more or less like the 600? Oh, more or less than the 600 series. I'd have to think about that. I think it's probably about on par. I never found the 600 series to slam all that hard. Maybe it depends on the amplifier with those. AFO old version for $500. Any better choices at a similar price? I would take the Ananda over the AFO old version. I think it's pretty close to the price. Yeah, like the microdynamics on the Aria it's excellent. There's nothing to complain about there. And it doesn't, like, it's a softer presentation than the LCDX, but not like that super soft presentation of the Ananda. Let's see. I'm thinking LCD4, HE1000 SC, Utopia headphones, Susvara Abyss will be in top 10. Okay, yeah. So for me, at the very top is the Hi-Fi Men's Susvara. Then after that, it would. I mean, it depends because I'd have to have an AB1266 here to review, right? And yeah, that. Unfortunately, I do not have one of those available. But yeah, a lot of those, like Utopia, would be up there, especially if you don't EQ. LCD4 would be up there if you do. HE1000 SE would be up there if you do, for sure. Yeah. Headphone would probably make the top 10. I tried the Sundaras and found them incredibly shouty and was listening to an older version. Yep, that sounds right to me. Yeah, I'll measure this. I still have the Sundara here, and I'll measure it on this new rig, the more accurate rig. So I'll post those measurements in the Sundara thread on the headphone forum. Do you think it's fair to compare an efficient $200 headphone that can be run off a phone to a $200 headphone that requires an amp? Ooh. Yes, I think it's fair. Because you have to remember that a lot of people already have amplifiers. And also, a lot of motherboards these days have DACs and amps. Like, there's motherboards that have, Saber DACs in them. So, there are amps there are motherboards now that have amplifiers. So I think we can be fairly confident in comparing those. Maddie, hey, what's up, man? Good to see you in the chat. Enjoying my dulcet tones in the final D8000 this morning. Nice, man. Nice. Are the HD660S worth the $380 they're going for now, though? Oh, are they on sale where you are? Okay. Yeah, because that's the thing I've run into with that. Is like in North America, the HD660S has been around $500. So to me, it's like the fact that the Sundara was $350 and I liked it better. It was like, well, this is a no-brainer. So I think really what you got to ask yourself is with that one is how confident are you in Hi-Fi Man build quality? Because I do think that the Sundara is better than the HD660S. The question with that though is that you got to figure out. Well, first of all, make sure that you're getting whatever the latest revision is. So buy it from a reputable dealer if you're going to get the Sundara. And then the second thing is, again, make sure that, how confident do you feel in the build quality? I actually haven't heard of Sundaras breaking the way that the old HE400i broke. And I know that there may have been some failure rates for the drivers like way back, but as far as I understand, the newer ones don't have those issues. But then again, like it's also not long enough to be able to tell what the failure rates would be like for long term. So I don't know. Have you heard the Sennheiser HE1 Orpheus? No, I have not. I have heard the Shangri-La Senior though, so that's a $50,000 system, and that was a very detailed experience. But I don't think those are like normal headphones. Like you can't. The Junior I would probably consider in like normal, right? Because that's only like I think that's even less expensive than this Susvara. I think. I think with the whole system it's like 8 grand, but just for the headphones themselves, I think it's less. Let's see. I think he would still recommend the Sundara based on 60. Yeah, that's right. I would still recommend the Sundara. Yeah, that's right. Like, okay, so the thing that gets me with the Sundara versus the 660S, regardless of the sound signature, which I think the Sundara is just flat out better for the sound signature. Like it's not brighter. It's more balanced. um, Even though there is more treble energy, but the salient fact about it is that it's more balanced, at least in my opinion. But the biggest difference is the soundstage. Where the 660S, it really like that ruins it for me. This for the 660S and the 650, and it's the only reason why those are not like to me. Those are not like the best headphones for so like under $1,000. Like the soundstage on them is just not good, and so that's why in my opinion the Sundara is worth it. It's worth the risk for QC. Um, but the other thing too that you have to consider is that the 660S is $500, and even if it's $380 for where you are, the 6XX is $220. So is the 660S really that much better than the 6XX? And I kind of think my answer is no. The one consideration with that is that I don't know what it's like shipping a 6XX with mass drop to Europe, where the 660S might be cheaper. So I think that's really where that comparison starts to be a difficult one. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Tyler? Sorry, I had to do the stream earlier. By modding my headphones, I found that most any material used in the front and back of the drivers play a big part in the sound. Most any material, yeah, that's front damping and rear damping. Those are two pretty important factors. It's like one of the reasons why I don't like to use the filters for the Aeon. Like they have the filters in the front. I'm not a huge fan of using them or I use like the one that's the least impactful. Since you're wearing ZMFs, what is your favorite pair, and what pair would you recommend to someone who likes a more laid-back sound signature? Verte open and closed. I'd need to have the closed back in to do like an evaluation of that. I think based on what I've heard of it though, like people's descriptions, I think I would prefer the closed back. And I said this earlier, I think, when not a lot of people were around. It's a bit unfortunate because I bought the Verte open before the Verte closed was available, and I didn't know that the Verte closed was even in the works. So I think for my preferences, I think I probably would prefer the Verte closed, just based on what people have described. So I probably, like at the time, if they were both available, I probably would have bought the closed, because I also like, for me specifically, like closed back is I really want that closed back, flagship headphone. If those are out of your price range, the ZMFO Tour is amazing. It's one of my favorite headphones. By modding, yeah, okay, I've got through that one. Verte closed and open are very similar. Yeah, exactly. I still EQ Verte open, and I use the BE2 suede pads right now. So if you guys want to see measurements of the Verte open with different pads, I'm going to be posting those to the forum, the headphone forum. And that's, sorry, measurements with the Gross 43 AG. Let's see. How easy is it to EQ the Hi-Fi Man HE1000 SE? Worth EQ or get anything better tuned one? Also, Empyrean successor news. I don't have any Empyrean successor news, but way back when when the Empyrean was like first out, I think like I remember reading something from one of the guys there that they like, it wasn't like they had a specific thing in mind already, but they said that they wanted to make something that was like a little bit more modestly priced. But I don't actually have any official news on that, unfortunately. For the HE1000 SE comment, yeah, so there's two things that bug me with the HE1000 SE. One was the crazy treble, like the 12K treble extension, which is just like out of balance. I think there was an issue there with 6K as well. Check out my review about that, because I think I actually talked about getting the tonality to be closer to that of the Ananda, and then it was definitely worth it. But the other thing that bugged me with the HE1000 SE was that the inside mesh, and they may have changed this since then, because this is like, you know, these planar companies, they do make these small changes here and there, but the inside mesh for the pads, like on the inside of the, like here, this part, it wasn't like super tight, so it would kind of like bulge out a little bit and like just ever so slightly touch part of my ear. And I remember just being so annoyed by that. Like, it's comfy, but because I have slightly larger ears, it just ever so slightly would rub up against that. But yeah, I think an EQ'd HE1000 SE is a fantastic sounding headphone. I would just go with the Susvara because it has slam. Although, yeah, it's more expensive, of course. Let's see. Okay, a few more questions, and then I'm going to call it a night. Verte closed is my preference over open. Both are excellent and extremely close in sound signature. Just for me, I notice a slight edge in 3D-ness for the Verte closed. Yeah, like, I mean, Tyler prefers headphones that are a little bit more like intimate and warm and cozy, and I prefer headphones that are more balanced. No, I'm just kidding, man. No, we actually share that like appreciation for the Verte and that sound signature. I mean, we both own Vertes. But his description there, that's one of the reasons why I think I would gravitate towards the Verte closed. And yeah, like for me, I'm always in search of the best closed back headphone, and I think the Verte closed could be that. Let's see. Congratulations on the new puppy. Yeah, Tyler, I'm jealous that you have a new puppy, and I want one. You'll have to bring it up next time you come visit. Is there a headphone that you've measured with the Gross that surprised you? Yeah, the LCDX actually surprised me. Well, I shouldn't say it surprised me. There's a few things that have surprised me. The Aria didn't surprise me so much, because like when you see the way that it measures on the Gross, you and then you see where the deviations are from, you know, like a given Harman target, you notice that, okay, this is actually fairly close to how you hear it. The one that surprised me more, I think, was the Utopia, because there's this perception, I talked about this earlier, but there's this perception that the Utopia is bright or that it's analytic. But if you look at the way that it measures relative to this Harman target, well, again, this is a Harman target. This is my custom Harman target. It's the Harman target that uses the 2013 bass elevation, but it uses the 2018 mids and treble. I could do the official one here. Let me just change this. That's my Harman target. But this, where's the other one? There's the other one. This is the 2018 Harman target. So the Utopia measures warmer than I think I would have expected, than I think most people expect. And it's funny, I think when Kryn originally, I could be wrong about this, but when Kryn originally posted his over-ear headphone list, for some reason I get the feeling that he said that the Utopia was warm neutral or neutral warm, and I remember reading that and going, what? That's a spicy take. No. But when you look at the measurement, it certainly is not a bright headphone. Now it's maybe a little, let's say, base light because it rolls off in the base a little bit, but I think the Utopia is more neutral than people imagine. The LCDX, I'll show you the LCDX here. Let's see. That's the LCDX. I'll just change the dotted line there. I haven't gotten to like measure everything yet, so I'll just bump it up here. Obviously, I would try to normalize it 1K, just so it looks okay. But yeah, that's the LCDX. And actually, what surprised me more about the LCDX is the LCDX with Reveal Plus, which doesn't measure. Like when you see the adjustment that's done on Reveal Plus, it looks more substantial than what it ends up translating into when you measure it on the grass. And so it fixes a few of the areas, but it's too conservative. I think it needs to have more energy here. But yeah, those are the ones that have surprised me. Is there any way to tell Sundara's older Sundara? Oh, the older Sundara apart from the non-shouty ones. Man, like it's tough to tell, but I think the difference is in the pads, and my hunch is that the newer ones are more angled. The newer pads are more angled. But I went over this with Wheezy, and apparently, like they're like we even measured like the narrowest part of the pads and compared them because I think he's got the older version. I think, and like they were very close. So, yeah, it might be difficult to tell unless you physically like have them side by side. I thought that you could tell from photos, but because like I have some photos of the older ones as well, and like I could pick it out pretty easily. But yeah, based on what the ones that I saw from Wheezy, it's pretty close. I think the bigger difference is actually in the way that the like the pads bulge kind of, and on the newer one the bulge is a little bit more noticeable and it's not as flush. At least that's another potential way of differentiating them. But actually my hunch with the Sundara is that they have a bunch of Sundaras there for reviewers that they send out, and those are potentially old stock that have just been there since the beginning, and the ones that are actually in circulation to buy I think are the new ones. That's, again, don't quote me on that, that's my suspicion, because I think Wheezy got one directly from China and I think it was the old one. Is there any way to tell? Okay, is the Aria really worth double the price of the Anad? So I was talking about this earlier as well, and no. But I mean, it's like with anything, if it's a little bit better, it costs a lot more. So it doesn't have to be twice the price. It just has to. It doesn't have to be twice the performance. It has to be just a little bit better, and then it justifies the price increase relative to other headphones in its price range. Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. I think it's one of the best headphones you can buy. Let's see. A planar Sennheiser would make up for all the mistakes in HD20 if it's well tuned. A planar, like if Sennheiser made a planar magnetic headphone, I would want it to be like a planar HD6XX or like a planar HD800S open back. Let's see. I have a Verte open paired with TXX79. I love it. Is upgrading the ZMF pendant worth a crit? Yeah, the ZMF pendant and the Verte is, it's such a crazy combination. Like the Verte, in my opinion, is best enjoyed on tubes, and it took me a while to realize that. I know there are some people who prefer it on solid state amps, but I really prefer it on tubes, and not any tubes, like good tubes, and like neutral tubes, like something like the pendant. Actually, you should email Zach. I know there's some bundles with the Verte and the pendant, and see if you can get the bundle pricing on the pendant if you bought the Verte from him and not used. Nice. Grado modding. I need to get into Grado modding at some point. Aria versus headphone. Few words. Yeah, I talked about that in my review, the Aria. Headphone is better for detail retrieval, textural nuance, structural definition, all that kind of stuff, image clarity. Headphone is also maybe a little bit more balanced for certain areas, depending on which revision of the Aria you have. But this version that I reviewed recently was basically perfect for tonality. I had no issues there. A headphone also probably has better dynamics. I need, again, I say probably, like I've reviewed them both, but I need them. I don't have the headphone here right now, so I can't tell you side by side. Um, Headphone is way heavier, like almost twice the weight. So like in my mind, I was actually very close to, like, the Aria is the headphone that if I was gonna buy a headphone under $2,000, um, and if I could, if the weight was not an issue, it would be the head audio headphone, absolutely. But because for me the weight is an issue, like I don't like heavy headphones, I would probably buy the Aria. That's kind of my take on that. And if you want punch and slam, you buy the Focal Clear. Otour versus Clear, or similar or different? What, more similar or different? Yeah, Otour is a more spacious sound, way bigger soundstage. Clear is a little bit more intimate and a little bit, I want to say, it's got a bit more treble zing to it, in the like treble proper, like 6 to 9 kHz, or 7 to 9 kHz. Whereas the Otour is like, it's got lots of treble energy there as well, but I almost find maybe a bit more balanced. Again, it's one of those that have to have the measurements up, and I have to have them side by side. Do you own any tube amps? I don't own any tube amps, but that's the Aurus Audio Uterp right there, or Uterpi. I'm butchering that name. And I actually think that, sorry, actually going back to the Otour versus Clear, I actually think the Clear is more detailed than the Otour, but the Otour presentation is larger. And I think all right, this is going to be a spicy take. I actually think I prefer the tonality of the Otour. Let's see. What is that phonitor that's beat in the background of Ages and it's getting a video? I'm hesitant to do a video on that because for amps and stuff like that, like the differences that you find are not extreme. Same thing like with the like, I'll do a video on the phonitor when I have a headphone that it makes sense to have that as the optimal pairing for it. Actually, I think maybe the Utopia might be the way to go with that. But so for example, the Cayenne IHA6, this is an amplifier that's made for inefficient planars. It's a high current amplifier with tons of power. So if you have inefficient planars, that's the amplifier that you get. If you have highly detailed dynamic driver headphones, something like the Phonitor X, I think is a good choice. But like for, yeah, the Susvara, I would take the IHA6. Let's see. Yeah, Verte on 789 wouldn't be my jam. No, 789 is fine. I don't know, like I don't think there's anything wrong with running a Verte off of a 789. I just think it's better off of tubes. That's just my preference. Are MIDI 99 Classics worth checking out for gaming and EDM? Yeah. Decent soundstage, tons of bass. Best soundstage I've heard in an IEM. Best soundstage? Probably the Tia Forte, 64 Audio Tia Forte. Legend X is pretty crazy as well. I'm not going to get into the Sennheiser HD700. Not at the moment. Okay. I've hopefully answered most of you guys' questions. I'm sorry if I missed any, but we'll have to do this again because it's been 2.5 hours and yeah, I have to run. But thanks everybody for tuning in for this Q&A. It looks like my internet has been pretty stable this whole time. I don't have any dropped frames. So, or it says 81 dropped frames, but it still shows 0.0%. So that's pretty good, I think. Which means that hopefully next time we have a guest on who is far more interesting than anything I have to say, we'll have good internet for that as well. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next stream. Bye for now.